Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Rosen Sports Monday. I'm really looking forward to this chat with a gentleman that I'm pretty familiar with, that we went head-to-head, as they say, in the TV business for many years, and now we're just kind of, in the words of Archie Manning, he used to say, we're robbing the same train, and that was kind of what Joe Schmit and I, along with Randy Shaver, were doing for years and years and years, a real unusual situation where the three of us were working against each other, but also together in the sports broadcasting world. And Joe's my special guest today. First of all, I want to thank our sponsors, Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood. Thanks to our good friend Charlie Swanson. As always, check out Lexus of Wayzata and Maplewood, and my friends at Stretch Lab. They have locations throughout the Twin Cities. You'll hear from our sponsors a little bit later and how effective and how big Stretch Lab has been in my life of late as well. Well, Joe, good to see you. Thanks for coming by. We just shared a couple different stages. We were at the Dunkers together a few months ago, and then just recently with the World Junior Hockey Championships over in St. Paul, we were involved in a little panel discussion, and that kind of set the light bulbs off. I said, man, that'd be fun to sit down and BS about our times, our horror stories about being in the broadcast business. But I mentioned the three of us, myself, you, and Randy Shaver, and I don't know how many years cumulative we worked together, in the same market, but highly unusual. And I don't know if we'll ever see that again in the broadcasting business. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it. And it was pretty special because I think we all made each other better. We all respected each other, but we all wanted to beat each other's brains in. Which when you think about it, Mark, there's a lot of people in the business that hate the other people or other businesses. Yeah, that we always kind of had that. Didn't mean we were trying to beat you.
No,
that was what was happening, but it worked out pretty well.
It did. So let's just go back. I mean, I haven't told my story too many times. You started at KSTP in what year? And you came from Green Bay? Is that correct?
I came from Green Bay. I was the sports director in Green Bay and had a chance to come here to be the number 2 guy behind Bob Bruce. And my first day on the job. Yeah, my first day on the job at KSTP.
He hated me.
Oh, did he? Well, he didn't like competition. That's kind of a
strong word, but I had my success with Bernard at KQ. I don't think he was real fond about that. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, that probably was it. That's an example where,
yeah, exactly what you just said. Yeah.
But anyway, my first day was the opening of Canterbury Downs. So that was June 26, 1985. And I remember I kind of just went there as a fly on the wall the first day. And KSTP did it big. They had a half-hour special. They had like 50 people down there. My newsroom in Green Bay didn't have 50 people. So I was like going, I think I just hit the big leagues here. Yeah. It was quite a start.
I will interject. The reason I remember that day is because the late, great Dave Moore was our anchor, of course, for many, many years. And WCCO decided to do a big spectacular out there as well at Canterbury. It was a technical disaster.
Oh, no.
And I remember when the 5 o'clock show went on and Dave Moore was caught on camera, like chewing a pencil. He'd be looking up at the camera. And I said, that may have been the worst newscast I've ever seen live. And then they had the 6 o'clock newscast, and that was even worse. But that's before, I think even local stations had the kind of the wherewithal to really produce up really good remotes, the kind of switching and cameras and everything they have today, and even not that many years ago with live views and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it was a mess to say the least, but it was a good day.
My line always is if they had YouTube back when I was first starting off, and for moments like that, a lot of us would not have made it this far. I know I wouldn't have, because back in the early days, I had no clue what I was doing.
Oh man.
I didn't have I started off with lacrosse. That's where I went to school.
Okay.
And, my mentor was a guy that didn't care about sports. He was the sports anchor and, a decent guy, but, he didn't teach me a thing. So right. I was kind of going at it myself and made more mistakes than any human being should make. So I would have been goes the dynamite guy. Remember that?
Oh, of course. So were you, for lack of a better term, were you kind of just self-taught when you came to, that's a big step, and KSTP is obviously a big player. And yeah. I remember Mark Curtis was here. You worked with Mark?
So my journey at KSTP started out pretty shaky. I came here from Green Bay. I signed a 3-year contract that every year renewed.
Right.
And by the end of the first year, They were going through a major change at KSTP. They were cutting the newsroom back about 30%.
Oh boy.
So I was on the cut list, but believe it or not, they had to inform me 60 days before the renewal of the contract. I'm watching this day by day as I'm watching people getting fired and laid off left and right. And I'm going, I'm toast. I'm toast. I got to day 59. They called me in the office and I said, are you going to pay me for the next 14 months or do you want me to work the next 14 months? They went, just a minute. So they went back. So that's how my career started there. So what happened is, in the meantime, in those 14 months, they said, keep working.
Yeah.
They shuffled me off to the morning show. And we got a new news director. New news director's here for about a month, and he calls me in for a meeting. I said, well, this is it. Now I'm getting fired.
Right.
And his name was Mendez Napoli.
Oh, I remember Mendez Napoli.
And Mendez was, in the town. He goes, what the hell are you doing the morning show for? And I was like going, well, that's where they have me.
Sports or news?
I was doing sports.
Okay.
I was doing sports. And he goes, I want you doing my 6 and 10 o'clock sports.
Oh, wow.
So I rebounded. So then I do that for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
KSTP is looking for a news anchor. Frank Maggott, our associates, which you have consultants too.
Right.
They come in and they say, we don't have a news anchor, but we got the hottest sports anchor in the country you can have right now. His name is Mark Curtis. So once again, I got demoted down to the morning show.
Oh,
so he worked for 2 years when his contract was done. Another news director came in, and then I got the sports director job.
You wonder why there's so much insecurity in this business that we were in for all those years, because you're always, even though people, well, you're secure, you're never secure. You never know what your bosses are thinking or what research they're relying on to determine your fate if you're not getting annual reviews. So it was always that way, right? I mean, you just kind of never knew what to expect.
Contract to contract, and it definitely scarred me. Because I was like going, I have to do everything I can to survive, right. because, and then when I, eventually became the sports director, then it was right before all the great stuff. It was after the '88 Olympics. The only thing that I missed that I really kind of regret, because that's the last time ABC had them.
Yeah. And
then, but by '90 when I picked it up, so was able to take part in all the crazy things that happened in 1991 into 92.
What a year.
1 year of the most amazing sports, because we had the World Series, the Final Four, the Stanley Cup Finals. Right. What else do we have?
We had Special Olympics.
The Olympic Festival.
Right.
All these things happened in this one time frame. Yeah. It was just incredible.
It's hard to tell people today who've grown up without experiencing any of that.
Well, we had the Super Bowl too. There was
that little thing called the Super Bowl.
Game we had the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, Washington and Buffalo. I think it was. Yeah, that's when Thurman Thomas left his helmet on the sidelines at the beginning of the game at the old Metrodome. And in the middle of this, I've been able to talk about this too, because people don't understand that you have a personal life, and I don't know. You guys have been married a long time.
Yeah, it can
be very stressful because you don't really know which way you're going, and you have to, you're working weekends, you're working nights, and I tried to explain to people. I said, don't feel sorry for us, but you have to understand it's not what just we're showing up and doing 3 minutes of sports or something, and then you go home. I mean, it's not that way at all. I mean, so it could put a strain on your family. It's difficult.
Yeah, we've been married 35 years, and it's interesting because. I used to always say that I understood Mark Rosen's and Randy Shaver's life better than anybody else, because we had the same stress, same deadlines, same travel, same things we were doing. Not that it wasn't great. It was all great, but there was work you had to do to it. But then my wife would always say, well, I understand Randy's wife and Mark's wife better than anybody, because
it's true.
We were raising families at that time, and many times they were single parent families.
I've said that a million times with Denise. I mean, she was a single mom. I mean, I come home sometimes. I don't know how often you get the news anchors would always be able to go home for dinner. It seems like
I never went home for dinner.
Yeah, I rarely. And when I did, I'd try to read my daughter Chloe at that point was very, very young, and I tried to read her a bedtime story, and then next thing you know, I'm looking at my clock and my watch, and time to go back to work. You know what I mean? And it'd be 8:00 because I had to get back and watch games and write the sportscasts, and it's like, well, I don't know if people feel sorry for you, but it's not a life that's for everybody, and it can wear on you, and it can it's you got to kind of push your way through it all, but. It's all worth it at the end.
It really is. I mean, it was a great pleasure. I used to always say that the benefits and perks and things that happened because of it, and the people you met, they certainly outweighed some of the times where you obviously couldn't be with your family. Or I remember I tell someone, I said, this was maybe the worst minute of my broadcast career. This family balance. My daughter Gabby was playing for the state softball championship, like 12UB,
right,
so it wasn't like, this was not a big deal. It was like in Grand Rapids,
Sure.
But I'm at the Baseball Hall of Fame as Paul Molitor's getting inducted in Cooperstown. And I'm sitting there with one of those big old cell phones, the ones that were like bricks.
Right.
And I'm like under the desk as other people are getting inducted. My wife's trying to explain to me softball.
What's going on?
She got a hit. No, it wasn't a hit. It was a get by pitch. She had no clue. And I was like going, you are a horse crap play-by-play announcer for someone who's married to a sportscaster. But that was, we all had those moments where you kind of miss stuff where you're like going, how can I be not upset, but I'm at this Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Right.
But part of me wanted to be in Grand Rapids watching my daughter play.
A lot of you would be.
Yeah,
I go through the same thing. I just remember, as both of us did Sunday night shows for a long time, half-hour anthology shows, whatever you want to call them. And, I would be in Philadelphia somewhere or whatever the case may be, and it'd be just the weather would be god-awful outside, and you have to do your show outside because that's what you did. And I'd say to myself, I'd rather do anything but be here right now. I'd rather be sitting on my couch watching, the Golden Globes or whatever, some movie. And you have to kind of psychologically fight through that to do those shows, especially if you're covering a team like we did too often that would end up losing in a championship type environment. Those were hard to kind of get through. I mean, just to kind of push through those things.
There were a few years where Gopher basketball made a run, the Wolves made a run, the Wild made a run, and that was back in the days TV had money. We traveled without even asking questions. We made our own. The Wild make the playoffs. We didn't even think about asking anybody or putting in a budget. Now, you probably don't even go until they get to the game 7 or they get to the second or third round.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because TV budgets, and I started out a lot longer than you did because I was just a kid in the business, but I remember just going to get stacks of cash from our administrative assistant when we go out of town. You didn't really have, company credit cards for the most part at that time. We just had cash available. And that'd be 3-4 of us going on the road to cover an event. And, those were the heydays of revenue and where local television was kind of the thing. And we've all know that the whole media world is, exploded and splintered with with the newspapers kind of basically going under, at least the printed versions of them, and our devices that we can get the sports and weather on. I can talk about that with you as well. One of our bugaboos, and our good friend, the dear Bud Grant, used to come up and say, he'd do that thing with his mouth.
Yeah.
Why does weather get all that time? Sports doesn't get much time. I said, can't help you, Bud. I don't know. He says, we all know the weather. We understand it. But
can I tell you my first interview with Bud? Yeah. You'll like this. So I come from Green Bay. So Bud's already leery of me already. The word's out that I'm at Vikings territory and I covered the Packers and we had the preseason contract. I did play-by-play on the preseason network. I was terrible at it. Paul Allen would look at it and laugh. But anyway, so I go out to a practice and, back then you could, hey, after practice, grab Bud for a couple of questions. Right. It wasn't, so we did this back in 1985. So I do this interview with Bud and he's not giving me anything because I'm the newbie. So I test you. He's testing me. So I go for 10 minutes with him, which is longer than we normally do when you get a head coach, unless it's lined up. Afterwards, he stops me. He goes, I'm going to watch the news tonight. When I watch the news tonight, you're going to have a 15-second clip from me out of this 10-minute interview. You're new here. Next time you interview, don't waste my time.
Is that what he said?
Yeah. And then he kind of smirked a little bit to let him know he was teasing, but yet, there's always truth and sarcasm, right?
Yeah, he would be an analyst about television news. He could have been a great consultant because he had his thoughts about it, but he was right about it. I remember doing, the Bud Grant show the first time, and he was a very intimidating guy until you got to know him, and he was real different. But once you earned his respect, then you're in with them. And he was a fascinating man on many, many levels and one of my favorite people of all time to be around.
I'm glad you said that because obviously after a while, if Bud sees you around, watches your work, knows you're not there to be a clown, then that respect button came out. And, then when you'd run into Bud, he'd want to know about your family, want to know your health. He'd talk to you about stuff.
Talk to you about anything but sports. I mean, he'd come in after a loss, and I'd see him on the phone, and I thought, oh man, he's talking to Bernsey or something about the loss and why we didn't do this or that.
Bernsey was already drunk by then.
Well, he probably was, but he was talking to one of his hunting buddies about what duck blind they were going to be in the next morning, and that was Bud, because the game was over. I can't do anything about it, win, lose, or draw, whatever it might be. I got to go hunting tomorrow morning. And that's why I was on the phone. I went, oh, okay, now I get it. It taught me a lot about life and keeping your priorities in order. Who are some of your favorite people that you got to interview here? And not just, obviously Bud had his own special place for lots of reasons, but kind of your go-to guys, and depending on what sport you're talking about.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking about that on the way here, figuring you'd probably ask me that. And, the obvious answers are, the Kirby Pucketts of the world. Everybody loved Kirby, and he had a special relationship, I think, with any of us who are around there very often. But the characters are always what is interesting in this sport. You go back to, Mickey Hatcher and Junior Ortiz, and some of these guys who are just characters and crazy people. I see Nate Burleson on the morning CBS Morning, and he was a character. It's just all these guys kind of down the line, and then quite frankly, it's the high school stories that you do, and then you watch these kids go on. You and I both know, Joe Mauer from day one. But it's also these hockey players, and all of a sudden you see Jalen Suggs, first round draft choice, and it's like going. I interviewed him in 8th grade. It's like crazy.
Did you have some athletes that wanted? I mean, I could go back to Rashad. That's where it all started. Where Ahmad, and I to this day I say that he wanted to be into this business, but he also was not too big to cover high school sports. He covered everything. He did everything for us because he wanted to get better. I don't know if you had an association with anyone, any athletes who said, I think I'm going to use this as a kind of a stepping stone. Maybe want to get in the media. That you were around, that you could tell had a kind of gift of gab and. We're pretty good at communicating with people.
Well, Dave Huffman. Dave Huffman had a great relationship with Dave. As a matter of fact, Dave was the color analyst for the Vikings, for a few years, and Dave did not have a game. So Dave came into the station and we recorded. I took an old Vikings game. I did play-by-play, and Dave did color, and that's what he turned in and got the gig from. So when Dave died, it was
so sad.
It was so sad because he was such a smart guy, and he died
way too young,
and there was drunk driving, and it was just so much of it didn't make sense.
No, he was a very colorful character long before like the Mike Morrises, and he kind of set the table for all. He just had a great sense of humor and a great way of looking at life. And I'm glad you mentioned Dave, because he was one of those guys we kind of forget about, unfortunately.
Well, you and I both had, we both had Tony Dungy on our shows quite a bit. We both had, I had Brian Billick for a while, and Billick not only wanted to be coach, and he went to be a broadcaster. So it's kind of fun watching those guys.
Yep.
Robert Smith was a regular on Sports Rep for a few years for us. I mean, you had the best show in town with Eddie McDaniel.
Oh my God. And Johnny
Randall.
People don't understand, we do, I don't know, how often did you do yours live versus tape? Did you record sometimes?
We tried to record it just because we weren't paying as much as you, so we made it easy.
For a while. That only lasted for a while. I got news for you. Then the budget, like everything else, decreased in a hurry. But yeah, Johnny and Eddie would drive a hard bargain. Well, it kind of goes back, I mentioned Rashad, but Ahmad, Ron Hamburg was our news director at the time. And Ahmad, we started the show right after his Hail Mary catch, 15-minute segment, whatever. And then he wanted to do it, but he lived in Lakeville. And Ahmad said, look, I want to do the show, but you're going to have to provide a limo for me, because I'm afraid of going home after a game, falling asleep and, forgetting to come in and blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, that's not my territory. You got to negotiate with Ron Hamburg, who was our news director / GM at the time. And I think he was asking for $50,000 a year. I went, I'm out of this conversation. So I went, good luck. So he went down. Next thing I knew, Ron went to his turf down in Mankato. They got the deal signed. He came back. And next thing I know, he was being dropped off by a limo every Sunday night. And then the problem was we'd go out afterwards. You know, back in the day, we'd end up at the Loon and, you know, Prince would be hanging out or so-and-so. And then what would happen is 2 days later, Ron would call me into his office. He goes, he's chewing me out. Like, what the hell was Rashad's? What was this limo out till 2 o'clock in the morning for? I went, I don't know. I wasn't with him till 2 in the morning. You have to ask him. Here's the bill for it. I went, well, that's part of the consequences that you deal with these athletes. But yeah, it was a different time for sure with all those guys.
I had limo service for Mike Tice, so there were a lot of 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning calls.
Really?
Oh God.
Yeah.
And it was like
those guys struck a hard bargain.
Yeah.
Can you imagine today? I mean, people understand. Denny Green would come out to the state fair show. We'd have a limo for him or something. But yeah, he was an interesting character, wasn't he? Denny, we had hot and cold kind of relationships with that 98 season, as we all know, was, to me, still the most heartbreaking Viking season. I don't know how you feel between that one and 2009, but that one got me. That was the best team.
They were so good.
Oh,
they were so good.
They were an offensive juggernaut compared to these teams we were watching this weekend.
Yeah, and they would have won the Super Bowl, although there were a lot of injuries on defense in that last game. I remember that's when remember Denny took the knee. And he had time, and he took the knee and took a lot of heat for that. As a matter of fact, Denny jumped on me once for that.
Yeah,
we had him on a show once, and he didn't see the pre-recorded thing.
Okay,
and the pre-recorded thing had to take a knee in there. Schultze wrote something up, and I read it. And anyway, the next thing I know, Denny was not happy.
Yeah,
Tice called me up next day. He goes, "Denny's effing you at a meeting here. What did you do to him?"
Well, now you know you've made it. That's the case, right? I mean, that's the thing too. People understand. Our business, I mean, wasn't always like, buddy with these guys. I've always felt I had to keep a distance. We got close to some of these athletes because you want to have good relationships. Like Brad Johnson was on my show all the time, and you mentioned Johnny and Eddie, but you had to be, objective about what you were talking to them about. It wasn't, you can't paint a rosy picture if they get beat, 28-10 about what happened during the football game.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it was a fine line because you did want to have a relationship with them, and but I think it really boils down to trust.
Mm-hmm.
Just that they know you're not going to make them look bad. That was never our objective.
I think for both of us, and Randy's not here to speak for himself, but I think if you showed up, as they say, if you criticized an athlete, a coach, whatever it would be. I remember Tom Kelly got mad at me for something, but he didn't like what I said one night. But, I was at the ballpark the next day or whatever the case may be. And so they see you there as opposed to just, hitting and running, as you might say. That made a difference. And that establishes your credibility with not just them, but with the viewers.
Did you ever run in with Steve Lombardozzi?
I didn't really have, I know he was kind of prickly.
Okay, so
I had lack of a better term.
I had kind of a famous one. And this was how, I think it probably ran him out of baseball, his kind of prickly side.
Yeah.
So he comes and jacks me one day. I had a pretty good relationship with him. I'm down at the Twins doing some pregame stuff. He comes and jacks me. And he says, I've been watching you and taking notes. He goes, we lost to Boston 5-1. You said we got blasted by Boston, mm-hmm. and we beat Cleveland 8-0. And you said we beat Cleveland. See, you are just. He literally took my adjective, my verbs.
He was paying attention.
He was paying attention. That how come Boston blasted them 5-1 and you beat somebody 8-0? It was like I said, I don't think that hard. It just happened that way.
That's funny. Yeah, there were some guys who would push back on you. There were some interesting characters. Dan Gladden was one that was kind of that way. And even Jack Morris, until 91 was, you just kind of tiptoe around some of these guys and understand that they have a different way of doing things.
I think the Gladden thing, we all vote for Twins Hall of Fame.
Right.
I think he had to wait a few years because there were enough people he ticked off over the years that said, oh yeah, let's let him simmer here a little bit. Because he obviously should have been in the Hall of Fame earlier.
Right. You mentioned high school, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to take a break and come back and talk about life after broadcasting, because I know you've had some really interesting things going on in your life. But I know I always still have such fond memories when we were in St. Paul over the weekend, but for us, when we got this, when you guys carried, you weren't there at that point, but the KSTB carried this tournament forever and ever and ever. And the WCCO spent $500,000, whatever, to get the rights for it. And they turned it into this extravaganza. And it was a fun thing to be a part of with my dear late friend, RJ Fritz, and the crew that we had. But just when I had a chance to be involved with it, you did for many years. It's hard to top it. People talk about that tournament in Olympic type terms because it's just, there's nothing like it. And there still isn't. Despite the fact they have more classes now.
I think other than getting a free trip to spring training out every year, I think that's the one thing I'm going to miss the most.
Okay.
I mean, besides the people and all that stuff. I mean, I've been to enough Vikings games and hockey games and football, I mean, whatever. I've been to enough games, but there's always something special about that tournament and doing that tournament and, realizing that nowadays people are literally watching it all over the world. We'd get texts and social media from, some U.S. hockey player who's playing in Bulgaria, who's watching, he's from War Road and he's
amazing.
watching, just things like that. It's just pretty amazing. But, I love places that have genuine energy, not where the fans are told when to cheer, not when the fanometer comes up, not when the organ plays that you have to yell cheer. And the state hockey tournament brings you that. It's one of the few last bastions of let's not oversell this thing.
Well, I have a picture that I cherish that had our crew all together. And unfortunately, 5, 6 of those guys are no longer with us. And even Tony Parker, Doug Woog, RJ Fritz,
too.
Of course, Herb Brooks. It was such a collection. Talent. And you try to live in the moment of realizing that we're working with Herb Brooks and he's breaking down a hockey game. And I tell the story because you worked with Louis for many years.
Yeah.
And to this moment, he's one of the great characters of all time. And Louis would have a different outlook than Herbie did about doing that tournament because we would be, we'd have a break between sessions at 6:30. We'd go down to the Civic Center, cafeteria. We'd eat some food down there. And Herbie would be diagramming power plays that, Rochester John Marshall should be running, and he was just all hockey all the time. And Louis would be calling Mancini's to make reservations.
Oh yeah,
for as soon as the game was over. I remember one time I was on the air with us, and during a commercial break, and they went to overtime. Whatever. I said, "God, Louis, isn't this a great game?" He goes, "Somebody just scored, so I can get the hell out of here and go to Mancini's to eat." But he was, the Godfather as he come. Mariucci was the Godfather, but Louis was something. He lived it for so many years.
Well, those two guys had, they had kind of a love-hate relation. I don't know if love-hate. It was just maybe a little ego against ego.
100%.
But my favorite one of all time is when Louis was the general manager, president of the North Stars, and he hired Herb Brooks to be his head coach. And Louis gets up to introduce Herb, and we have a 5-year plan for sustainable winning. And, we got this all put down together, and Herb gets up and gets the shot in right away. If you have a 5-year plan, Louis, how come you signed me to a 3-year contract?
Perfect.
Does that sum up their relationship?
100%. Yeah. We miss him to this day. He had quite an influence on our lives and special guy for sure. We're going to take a break right now and come back and talk a little bit more about the other side of Joe Schmit's life. Interesting one as we move on with our lives and stay engaged with this community. So we appreciate you listening. It's time now to hear from our sponsors, Stretch Lab and Lexus of Wayzata and Maplewood. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with 2 great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today. Hey, Mark Rosen here for Stretch Lab. I had my introductory first stretch when I was visiting my relatives in New Jersey. I went to the local stretch lab there for my 50-minute session. I felt so good afterwards. And when I came back, I immediately called that stretch lab in Eden Prairie. They have locations all over the Twin Cities where my nephew first signed up. I've been hooked ever since. There are locations I mentioned throughout the Twin City area, but I stuck with my Tuesday morning appointment with Jason to get my 50-minute stretch in as part of my schedule. It's like a meditation session. He stretches out my legs, my hips, my back, my neck, my traps, all of it, and I take some deep breaths, and I feel like a new man every single time I leave. My nephew's in his late 20s. I'm a little bit older, but it doesn't matter. Stretching is so important in our daily routine. Having an expert do the work is the only way to go. My advice, give Stretch Lab a chance to improve your overall health. Check out a location near you. And welcome back to Rosen Sports Monday, having an engaging, breezy conversation with Joe Schmit. This is fun. I'm really enjoying this.
Sounds weird, by the way, you saying Rosen Sports Monday.
I know.
I've been trying to get over that one here.
I know. It's a clever way of looking at things. Well, Joe, you took some detours along the way as well. I mean, because I remember you were there and all of a sudden you were working with my sister-in-law at the time. Oh, she still is technically. Wendy Williams Blackshaw at Sun Country. You went to Sun Country. So tell me if you won't mind talking about kind of the transition of what happened with TV and other businesses.
Well, so what really happened is, so I went to news for a while.
I remember that.
And you know what? It was a square peg in a round hole. I realized I'd like to have control and write my own things or whatever. When you go to news, you have no control. You can't stack the lineup. You can't. Yeah. But anyway, I did it partly because of what we had talked about earlier, a sports schedule. My kids were at the age where it was like, man, I was missing way too much and traveling way too much. So I went to news, and then in the meantime,
you were anchoring.
Yeah, I was anchoring. Yeah, I was anchored with Cindy Bricado.
Oh my goodness! And she worked over at our place too for a long time.
Yeah. So we won't go there. But anyway,
you don't have to. It's a podcast. Everything's open.
I had an opportunity to go and work with Sun Country and run a media marketing department. So I went for it because I did it for 2 years and truth be told, I came back because that business all dissolved in a big mess. Well,
it still is a big mess for Sun Country. As we saw over the weekend, a new buyer for the airlines.
Yeah. So
Tom Petters was there too, right?
Yeah. That was part of the deal. Yeah. So
right.
And there was guilt by association, and I had nothing to do with anything there, but my name was there, and that's the name that got put in the paper. Well, so anyway, I had a couple of clients in my media marketing department that I thought, well, maybe I'll start my own business, and I was kind of figuring out what to do. Then I get a call from Channel 5. They're looking for a new sports anchor, and they said, would I help them in the search? And I thought, another client.
You're right.
Never thought about coming back. Well, then I Dick Cheney'd them. I said, why don't I come back? Because they actually asked, what would it take for you to come back? And then I said, well, I had known what happened to the department. I said, I need to bring some people in that I trust, that I want to work with and spend time with, because as you well know, and I think we're both pretty lucky there, and maybe we did some. We had people we worked with for a long time in our departments,
both photographers and producers,
and that's not normal either.
No, you're 100%, and total credit to the people who do a lot of that work behind the scenes.
And they're friends, they're people who, they did. You hate to say this, they did a lot of the things we did with the hours and whatever, but didn't get the fame or the money.
Right.
It's just being honest. So.
True.
So to have those people, the Gary Schulzenbergs of the world, and the Genos and all those guys that work, with me, and I know you had them with Maida and other guys
Terry
too.
Clancy, and Tom Ryther, who's still there, and Crocker, the late Al Crocker, who was a photographer for us, and one of the greatest characters.
Speaking of characters,
I've ever been had the association with in my life. I mean, he was a bridge for not just me, but for all of us in the business. Just the way Al carried himself. I could do an hour on Al.
Yeah, you could
another day on
it. You'd want to make sure that kids aren't listening.
He had some fun.
There were characters. Yeah, we had Johnny Gross was one of our photographers. So it was like
great human being,
just 100% energy. I've never met a guy who loved his job as much as Johnny. I got to tell you a quick story about Johnny, and we lost Johnny a few years back. We're out at Vikings mini camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I get there a little bit late. Practice had already started. And I noticed Johnny's running all over.
That's all he did.
Shooting up. And he's sweating through pants and shirt. I go over to Johnny, this is mini camp. I need 3 shots of the number 1 draft choice, get a couple cutaways of the coach. I said, don't kill yourself. Don't kill yourself. Just settle down. All of a sudden, Adrian Peterson walks by. He goes, okay, Joe, I'll settle down. Boom, he goes sprinting full blast after Adrian Peterson. I was like, I don't think he
can't control him.
No, but it was the unbridled enthusiasm. It was like, I guess you'd rather have that than some guy saying, do I have to shoot that?
So the second time around, did it feel the same? Did it feel like, hey, I'm embracing this, that this is kind of where I belong?
That I was fearful coming back the second time. Not that I didn't think I could do it, but I didn't know would I have the same passion I had before.
Mm-hmm.
But that was pretty quick because of I had a younger team. They kept me on my toes. That was definitely one of them. And I realized in the 2 years I was off television and I'd watch local news, and I kept saying to myself, why are they wasting our time? And I thought, if I go back and I get my 3 minutes of sports every night, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm either going to inform you, entertain you, hopefully give you some insight you don't know. And I really kind of took that part of it serious.
Yeah.
Just we see it all the time. I mean, one of my pet peeves is like, okay, right now we've got all this stuff going on in Minneapolis. And what do they do after our coverage? We will continue to follow this story and you'll see it online. And it's like going, no, we just thought the story ending. We're not going to cover it anymore. Be like a bank saying, hey, if you put your money in here, we're not going to steal it from you.
Correct.
That's what you're supposed to do when you run a news station.
I know. It's all changed, though, so much. It really has. So you were there. I mean, both, obviously I retired a little early because of my wife's illness. But I was scheduled I had already kind of signed my last contract, and that was just, the nature of the beast. And they were going to go, this is what you're going to get paid. And, this is the way it's going to be. And my news director, Mike Caputa, kind of laid it out and gave me some choices. And I made, the one I made. And then sadly, my wife ended up getting very ill with brain cancer, and that obviously rushed things a little bit. And I think, I don't know, you went after Randy, right? Randy retired.
Randy retired. Yep. And then I was
having some brief conversations with you about it when I'd run into you, and I'd say, what kind of pushed you? And I want to get into your whole speaking thing, but why was it time for you? Did you feel like this is the time to get out permanently?
I wanted to get out while I still wanted to do it.
Okay.
I could see myself going, oh, it's another Viking season. It's another Vikings mini camp. It's another, and I thought I can't do it if I'm going to half-ass it. Yeah. And so I started seeing that coming a little bit. And then I also started looking at time. Because people say, why did you retire? Because people say you retire to speak and all that stuff. I said, when I really boiled it down, I don't call it retirement, call it reinvention.
Correct.
Because of time. You only have, I don't have to talk to you about you losing your wife. You only have so much time. Mm-hmm. So how much time are you going to be healthy? How much time are you going to be able to play with your grandkids? How much time? And I just thought it was the perfect time. I wanted more time. And now I can control my time with my speaking business. I can say yes or I can say no.
Let me talk to you about that because, this is what we do. We talk for a living, and, we both had radio experience. We both had different things. But you got deep in the weeds with your speaking experiences. What kind of prompted you to get into that, and what the approach that would make you stand out from, a lot of people that enabled you to get a lot of these jobs?
Well, that's a good question. What happened is like you and everybody else in the business, we get asked to speak at athletic banquets and Rotaries and Lions clubs and MC events. And I used to, whenever I had to speak, I'd get up and I'd tell what it was like to be in the locker room in 87 and 91 and covering Kirby Puckett. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm just patting myself in the back, name dropping. And just the other day, Oprah called me and said, Joe, you got to quit name dropping like that.
It's a good line.
But anyway, then I just started telling stories about people who made an impact, stories about Tony Dungy and Joe Mauer and stuff. Had nothing necessarily to do with sports, but had to do with character and had to do, with values. And And then I had people, well, the big change was Walter Bond saw me speak. Remember Walter Bond?
Of course.
Yeah. So Walter Bond played for Clem Haskins and the Gophers.
Yeah.
He was the best sixth man. He went from being a guy who never was really a regular starter in college to a free agent starting opening day as a rookie for Dallas. Well, Dallas was pretty bad back then.
Yeah, they were.
But he did. And he's one of the top speakers in the world. And he saw me speak somewhere and he said, we're having breakfast tomorrow morning. I said, okay. He said, where? So we went and had breakfast. He goes, you're going to become a speaker. You're going to do this.
No kidding. He was your impetus.
And of course, Walter had a camp he wanted me to come to. But I looked at it and thought about it, and I thought, I'm going to go. So I went down to this camp that Walter had down in Florida. It was a boot camp. I'm there. I'm the only non-All-American there. Jerry Stackhouse is there.
My.
Russell Maryland is there. Carl Mecklenburg. All these athletes who wanted to become speakers like Walter, because Walter was killing it.
Motivational, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, I'm the only one who's not a athlete there. But I came out of there with a business plan, with things I wanted to do. I hired a coach. I joined the National Speakers Association, and I decided to go all in. I made it part of my contract on Channel 5 when I came back that I could do this because it was pretty important to me. And now it's become kind of my mission, my passion. I have met some amazing people. I've written some books. I mean, it's just kind of fallen in. I kind of listen to what happens, and the same passion I had to sports, back when I was 20 and 30, I have here for this.
Well, it's nice to have, as they say, the second chapter in your life.
Yeah.
And you have that same passion for it. Because if you don't have passion for anything, for what you do, then it's not going to work. And you know that. I can hear it in your voice, and I know you. I've seen your presentation. It's you got it down. I mean, you understand what it takes.
Well, it's interesting because when people. There are a lot of professional speakers out there, a lot of people smarter than I am and have better ideas. But people ask me, they'll say, what sets you apart? And I said, well, being on the set for 40 years on TV, I said, I'm pretty good at ad-libbing, changing things on the fly. All those things that we've done for years. When the video doesn't pop up, what do you do? Your guest doesn't show up. You learn to go with the flow. And then kind of like, going out and talking to people with the interview thing. I do a lot of that in my presentations because that's part of our DNA.
So you're keeping pretty busy with that.
As busy as I want. I have some fun. I had a speech in Australia last year. I'm going to New Orleans next week. And the hotel I'm staying at, this is what I like to do.
Yeah.
If I can't take my wife, she's directing a play. Some of the nice things. So I'm staying in the hotel across from the World War II Museum.
Oh, it's the best.
So I'm going to go do the World War II Museum. I had a speech in Atlanta. I like presidential libraries. So whenever I had a speech in Atlanta, so I went to the Jimmy Carter Library. So I kind of try to mix some fun with it too. Yeah. When I took my daughter with me to Australia.
What an experience!
Yeah, it was just outstanding. We stayed 7 days. It was my adult daughter, and people said, "What was the best part of the trip?" And they're thinking, like the Sydney Opera House, seeing the kangaroos. I said, "No, spending 7 days with your adult daughter with nobody else around."
I got goosebumps. I know what you mean. I do that with my daughter Chloe. I try to spend that kind of time. It's not easy to do, but it is so special. And then in the midst of all this, the last time I think we connected with kind of was your book you did with Joe Mauer, a children's book, and fill people in on that because I know it's a lot more going on behind the scenes with the book and where it's going.
I always like I call it the law of unintended consequences. When you do something like, for example, you never realized you'd be doing pregame shows for Channel 9. I guarantee that would be the law of unintended consequences. Correct. But so I wrote the children's book with Joe Mauer, and all the money goes to charity. And the main storyline in it is Joe walked a young student who was blind to the lunchroom every day at Cretin-Derrimall High School, and the impact that it had on everybody else, basically in that lunchroom and in that school. Well, I wrote the children's book, and Stages Theater got a hold of the book. They liked it. They called me and they said, "Can we turn this into a musical?"
Wow! I
called Joe, and Joe said, as long as I don't have to sing, we're good with it. And so in April, it'll debut at Stages Theater. It's going to run for a month. It's called The Right Thing to Do. They hired a guy by the name of Michael Mahler to turn the book into the musical. He did Diary of a Wimpy Kid, the same treatment. So it's really going to be amazing. We're actually trying to raise money to do a documentary on the whole process.
That's fantastic.
And it's
so it's a 1 month run. That'll be at the Stages.
At Stages, but it's already been picked up by
wait, is it Hopkins?
Hopkins, yeah, downtown Hopkins.
I just went by it the other night.
Yeah, and we're going to have a VIP night on April 19th.
That's
that
fantastic.
There'll be a fundraiser for the theater and stuff. So it's just fun when these things just kind of happen out of the blue.
Great? I mean, you can use your name and your contacts and find things that are invigorating and whatever, spiritual, whatever it might be. Before I get you out of here, there's one person you mentioned, the word blind. We were both very close. I just got goosebumps thinking about Mike Veck.
Yeah.
And you were very close with him. And I know you did a lot of stories on his daughter that resonated with so many people. And you talk about getting up in the morning and having a positive approach to life. You're around a guy like Mike Veck, who was my only guest on my last Sports Sunday show. But you had a special bond with him and his story with his daughter.
Well, his daughter was my daughter's age, and I was emceeing an event that Mike was speaking at, and I could just tell Mike was off.
Yeah,
and it was just because I had been around Mike enough, and Mike always says I was the first one. We did a live shot at one of his Saints games before they were even the team, and he'll never forgot that. But anyway, I said, Mike's everything okay? And he said, I just found out my daughter's going blind. And that's when they thought she had retinitis pigmentosa. So we ended up doing some stories, and I became very close with Mike and Libby, his wife, and Rebecca, his daughter, and we did a few follow-up stories. They went and we actually, once again, this is back when you would do stories the right way. Right. Money was an object. Mike testified at Congress to a congressional committee trying to get more funding for prevention of blindness. And we're in the Capitol and Mike sits there and goes, "You don't know the fear, what it's like to be a dad when your daughter asks you when you put her to bed at night, when I wake up, will I be able to see?" And I was like going, "Oh my God," cut my heart out right there. Yeah. And I had a daughter the same age, you same thing. And so we're not in the TV business. We're kind of in the relationship business. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it, how lucky we were to have people like Mike Veck and Tony Dungy and John Randall and some of these characters we've been talking about. And there are many, many more. I think of Chubb Reynolds, a football coach I interviewed at Roseville. He was at the college up in Roseville, the Catholic college. I'm missing my...
Yeah, I know what you're... Not Concord. It doesn't...
I'll get it. Yeah. But anyway, he was dying of cancer. I did a story, him sitting on a golf cart, and it was my Tuesdays with Maury. I said I should have written the book on that alone. But so we all have those people and those stories in our lives that are kind of unforgettable.
Well, I think Mike was one that, to me, even as in the depths of despair and I'm sure depression, he managed to inspire people and put a smile on all of our faces with the way he got up every morning with knowing what he was dealing with and not falling victim to what everyone would have understood, that this is as bad as it gets, and kudos for him and for his family and what he entailed. That is for sure. So that had to stand out. I mean, among other stories.
Have you seen the Saint of Second Chances, the Netflix thing?
I have.
Yeah. If you haven't seen that, it's on Netflix. It's about Mike and it goes back to his Demolition Disco.
It's well done.
It's very well done. And the interesting thing about Mike is that Demolition Disco days, for years he tried to run from it. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, when he started embracing it, it's like
he got in vogue.
He's speaking all over the country.
Yeah, that's right.
Like he had the documentary done all because, he realized that this was going to be part of his life.
Well, this has been fun, Joe. And I know it's as you say, we were competitors for a long time, but I really value your friendship and all the years we spent together. And, it's nothing but good things going forward. And I appreciate your time. And in the words of Joe Schmit, that's a wrap.
Thank you, buddy. And I appreciate this. And we were pretty lucky, Rosie. We were pretty lucky.
We were. Yep. We were. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's edition of Rosen Sports Monday with Joe Schmit. Have a great day.